released. They can't just say, well, we're going to have kind of preventive detention, and we're just going to arrest everybody. But here it says, this is true, but if there's a rebellion, the changes of rebellion invasion of public safety may be required. So let's say that Iraq gets the Navy, invades the United States. Well, we've been invaded. They could arrest various people, not charge them with anything and hold them because they think, well, we think these people may help Iraq. But in ordinary cases, they're saying you can't just be picked up and held. For instance, in Missouri, you have to be charged with a crime within 20 hours of release. And they just can't hold you. Say, well, you know, we're kind of suspicious of this. We suspect you of some kind of crime. We're going to hold you for a couple weeks if we find something. No. They can charge you or release you. Well, Japanese. Yeah, this is one of the things that really wasn't taught in history when I took it. But most of you, I guess, have learned that what the United States did after we got into the war, took people of Japanese ancestry, people who were legal aliens, people who were citizens on the West Coast, and rounded them up and put them into very concentrated areas, which some people describe as concentration camps, in terms of areas where they had to go and people lost their businesses and things, and this was challenged in the courts. And the Supreme Court ruled that the government had the power to do it. I mean, I can't imagine today that it would rule that way, but that's what they did. They said it was okay to do it. Well, their rationalization was that people of Japanese ancestry were going to have a tendency of helping the Japanese. And there were all kinds of people on the West Coast that were afraid of invasion by the Japanese. Because they hit Pearl Harbor. There even were some kind of little balloon fire bombs that went off in the Oregon forest. So there were a lot of people that were extremely nervous. Now, obviously, it was racially motivated because you didn't pick up people with German ancestry to fight the Germans and put them in. You pick up people with Italian ancestry and put them in. But they did so with the Japanese. Ironically, they did it here on the mainland, but they didn't do it in Hawaii, which, if you look at it logically, would be the first place that would be attacked in terms of landing. But they did do it there because the Japanese, there were so many Japanese, and they were so integral to the economy. The military there said, "This is crazy. You can't do it. You know, who's going to run things?" So they didn't do it where, from their perspective, it might be the most dangerous. But they did it here. Yeah, it's really. There is absolutely no justification for it, but the Supreme Court okayed it. And the camp lasted for about 3 years. You got a question or comment?
Well, I was just trying to, I was going to ask about what particular part of the Constitution let them do that, and then you said the Supreme Court, so they can make that kind of a rule.
Now remember, we talked about, what the rules are, what the Constitution is. Really what the Constitution is what the Supreme Court says it is. They interpret it. So you have one court saying segregation is legal, another court 58 years later saying segregation is not legal. And as the narrator in one of my films says, actually what the Constitution is what 5 members of the Supreme Court said. Because there are 9 members, and the 5 of 9 say this is the decision, this is the decision. And things can change. And we'll see a little bit later that there has been an attempt the last decade for the Supreme Court to change their ruling on abortion, on Roe versus Wade, but they don't have enough votes. If Bush had been elected, he would have appointed 2 Supreme Court justices rather than Clinton. They might have switched. But he wasn't. Clinton appointed people who supported it, and they don't have the votes for it. Okay, notice this next one. No bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. Now, a bill of attainder means that you cannot have a legislature pass an act saying somebody's guilty of something. The courts have to decide. So the Missouri legislature could not pass a law saying, I am guilty of selling drugs. The courts would have to find this out. I am guilty of selling drugs. What about ex post facto laws? No bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. Anybody know what an ex post facto law is? Ex post facto. Okay, after the fact. So you can't be punished for doing something that was not illegal when you did it. You know, as an example, during the 1960s, a number of young people got involved with LSD. And this was an illegal drug. But when it was discovered first, out in California, when they made it, and initially it was not illegal, and the guy actually who was involved in this became a millionaire. Then they found out the repercussions of it. They made it illegal. Well, they couldn't go after him for an illegal drug because it wasn't illegal at the time. No ex post facto. Okay. This next part, talking about direct taxes and things, was used as an argument that there could not be an income tax. Because it talks about direct taxes shall be laid less in proportion to the census, da-da-da. And a direct tax, in other words, the federal government doing a direct tax on people. But as we'll see, there was an amendment to the Constitution allowing the federal income tax, which has only been existing in the 20th century, and this makes this thing kind of irrelevant. The amendment you can have the federal income tax. Next part, no tax or duty shall be laid on articles of sport from any states. So in other words, the government can't put taxes on these things coming from one state, from one state to another state. Notice the next part, no power shall be given any regulation of commerce or revenue to the courts of one state or those of another. These things deal because under the Constitution, the federal government is given the right to regulate the waterways. The state of Missouri does not regulate, for instance, the Mississippi River. The areas where the Mississippi River is, the federal government does. And what they're supposed to do is not supposed to give any kind of preference to one state over another. Now look at the last paragraph under that article, dealing with titles of nobility and gifts and stuff like this. And here's my question. Ray Levy, you here? Okay, here's my question to you. Did I pronounce your name right this time? Okay. Let's say that Clinton makes you the ambassador to Saudi Arabia. And you're a big hit there because the people of Saudi Arabia are not used to seeing women in position of power, and they like you and all this. And when the new year comes around, they give you a gift of $1 million bracelet. It's not much to them, but to you, it's a lot of money. Now, under this thing, under this paragraph here, can you keep it? Or do you have to tell the Saudi Arabians, no, take your gift back, I don't want your gift? And then by that time, insulting the Saudi Arabians, they get all kicked off the United States, and all kinds of bad things happen. What do you think? Can you keep it? Or do you have to give it back? Maybe you'll hide it and not tell anybody. Now, there have been a lot of references to Nixon and with this impeachment thing, but one of the kind of side issues that came up under Nixon was that he'd received, or his wife had received $200,000 in gifts from various foreign leaders, and still have. And this became a law. It didn't deal directly with Watergate, it became kind of a side issue. Can you keep the bracelet? Why not? Okay, so if Congress says okay, then you can do it, right? If Congress does not say okay, you can't keep it. Now, what do? You've got this bracelet. This says you can't keep it unless Congress okays it. They haven't okayed it. You give it back. The Saudi Arabians are very upset because in many cultures, gift giving is very important to the culture. Now you've insulted these people, and they want American military forces out of Saudi Arabia. You've done it. So what do you do? Any ideas? Well, if Congress says you can keep it, you can do that, right? But let's say Congress doesn't. Any ideas what you can do with it? Okay, you usually get gifts to the government, right? These gifts are supposed to be turned over to the government. Things like this happen. So it's not that you don't take it, because this is viewed as a some kind of insult, but you can't keep it unless Congress says you can keep it. So you turn over to the State Department. I don't know exactly where the place is. They have a place for this. You can use it. Good question. Yeah. Well, no. They could understand in terms of the laws. They would get mad if you didn't accept. I think this was Libya, but this is not based on the Constitution, because this talks about no person holding any office of profit or trust. Okay, under Faircom was a private individual. It dealt with federal laws dealing with money coming from governments, and possibly money coming from governments that have been labeled to a certain way, labeled terrorist. I'm not sure whether it's that or just from certain other governments. That was the key thing. It wasn't under the Constitution, it was federal law. Okay, the next part here, powers denied to the states. First part kind of self-explanatory. No state shall enter into any treaty alliance. The state of Missouri cannot enter into a treaty with England. Okay, we're a state. That's it. Notice this next part: no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any imposts or duties on imports, exports, etc., when the absolutely necessary. So, in other words, states cannot put taxes on foreign goods and things coming in. Any questions on any of these parts we talked about? Okay, on the executive part, let's just read the first. We'll take a look at the first couple of sections, then we'll switch over to the 12th Amendment. I ask you to read the 12th Amendment because that has taken place of what is listed here. Executive power invested in the President shall hold the office 4 years, and along with the Vice President. And notice that's just kind of the basic setup. And then they take a look at literally how the president is elected. Now, let's say this. Let's see, Who voted in the '96 election? Okay. What is your name in the gray shirt? Yeah. Okay. Now, when you went in and voted, did you have like a little pin where you would push in? Okay. I don't know who you voted for, but let's just say, since Clinton carried Missouri, did you vote in Missouri? Okay, let's just say you voted for Clinton. I don't know who you voted for. Let's just say you did it. You pushed in here. You push this button in next to Clinton. Now, when you do that, who are you voting for? You're voting for Clinton. Does everybody agree with that? She pushes this in next to Clinton's name. Who's she voting for? Okay. The first thing is you're not voting for Clinton. You push it next to Dole. You're not voting for Dole. You're voting for electors. You're voting for people who have promised that if they are elected, not Clinton, but if they are elected later on in December, they promise they will vote for Clinton. Same thing with Dole. You vote for them. Now, the electors are based on population. So the easy way to figure it out is you add up the representatives, plus the senators. Missouri has 9 plus 2. That's 11. State like California is in the 50s. So it's much more important to carry a state, much more important to carry a state like California than a state like Missouri. Now, what if this happens? Let's just say in Missouri that Missouri has 11 electoral votes, and there's 11 million votes. Clinton gets 6 million, and Dole gets 5 million. How many electoral votes does Clinton get out of Missouri? Anybody got ideas? Clinton gets 6 million votes. Dole gets 5 million votes. Missouri has 11 electoral votes. How many people pledged to Clinton are elected? How many people pledged to Dole are elected? Anybody got a guess? Clinton gets all 11. It's winner take all. And as we'll see a little bit later, when we get into the politics and stuff, you can have situations in which people who have the most popular votes lose. And this has happened 3 times in American history, the last time in 1888. Because popular votes do not elect the president. The only thing that elects presidents are the electoral votes. The only thing you do when you go in and vote is to determine where these electors are going to go. Are they going to go for Clinton? Are they going to go for Dole? And when you see these newscasts that say, the President of the United States, Clinton has been reelected. Clinton has not been reelected in 1996 in November. Clinton is reelected in December when the electoral votes, the electoral college votes. All the November elections do is to decide where these electors are going to go. Now you may think this is crazy, this is stupid, why does this happen? We're going to take a look at the 12th Amendment to why it happens. Because that's what they set up. We do not have a direct election of president. You know, there have been a number of stories, for instance, about Russia lately, and Russia having its first democratic elections ever. Russia's elections, in a sense, are more democratic because people vote directly for the president of Russia. You vote for Yeltsin, you vote for somebody else, your vote is counted that way. Here it's indirect. You do not vote for the president. You vote for people who promise they will vote for the president. Are people who promise they will vote for Dole.
Why was this originally established?
Well, supposedly, one of the reasons was that at the time the Constitution was set up, the idea was, let's say that you were maybe a successful small farmer in Georgia. You might know kind of the prominent people in Georgia who had a lot of skill and ability, but you wouldn't know, say, a prominent person in Massachusetts. Lack of communication, there's just water travel and stuff like that. So the idea was, well, you would vote for kind of the best people you thought of, and in Georgia, and these people who ran in kind of higher circles than you do would know kind of the better people in the other states. And this was I think, the prime reason for it. And there have been, as we see when we get to the political part of the course, there have been various attempts to change this, but it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened.
You said that Clinton gets all of them votes.
Mm-hmm.
So what?
Well, if he gets 6 million, and Dole gets 5 million, Clinton has carried the state. Now, when we get to the political thing, we'll see that there's kind of one exception to this in one state. But basically, the way it works is if you carry the state, you get all the electoral votes, even if you carry it, 51% to 49%. Now, the reason, if you'll notice, in the last couple of elections in '92 and '96, there are a lot of people made trips to Missouri, even though it's not, one of the really, really big states. And the reason is, Missouri is viewed as a swing state because we have, well, even now, you have a Democratic governor, you have 2 Republican senators, so you can go Democrat and go Republican. You didn't see anybody going up to Alaska. just 3 electoral votes. And same might go out to Hawaii. 2-4 out, not a lot of electoral votes. So they concentrate their campaigns on the really large states and on the states that are swing states. Any questions about that part in terms of who you're voting for when you vote? Okay, you're not voting for president. You're voting for these people you don't know, who have promised that they will vote for the candidate you want. All right, let's take a look then and see how this works. Let's go switch to the 12th Amendment. Now, the 12th Amendment really came about because of the way the Electoral College was working in the base part of the Constitution. And the way it worked before you had the 12th Amendment was this. The electors just put down 2 names. They didn't designate really who was going to be president or vice president, just 2 names. The person with the most votes became president. The person with the second became vice president. So you can have a situation where you have the president of one party, the president of one party, and the vice president of another party, which is what you had in 1796, where you had John Adams, who was a Federalist, and Jefferson, who was a Republican. But then in 1800, when Jefferson is running for president, all his supporters voted, put down 2 names. They voted for his candidate for vice president, who was this guy, Aaron Burr. And so they both put the 2 names down. So they ended up tied. But everybody knew, Jefferson and Burr. But Burr decides, well, if I'm tied, why not go for the #1 job? And there's this protracted thing where Burr's trying to maneuver in Congress and stuff to become president. And because of this, okay, they amended the Constitution. And notice this part here. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be inhabitant of the same state with themselves. Now, what does that mean?
President, vice president cannot be from the same state.
Cannot be from the same state. Right? So you have to have from different states. Now, what if you have 2 people? What if you have 2 people who you really want and they are from the same state? How do you get around it? How do you get around it? Well, if you don't like it in Missouri, you want to live in New York, what do? Well, move. Let's go live in New York. Now, you have some people, for instance, maybe you don't like paying the state income tax. Maybe the state income tax is paying like $10,000 a year of your income. You don't want to pay the Missouri state income tax. Well, go move to Texas. You don't have to pay a state income tax in Texas. You save yourself $10,000. You can do that again. Same thing here. Then you just get around and you just move. Okay? You just say you're coming on this thing. So this is really not too much of a problem. But this next part here was a key thing. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president. Okay? And in distinct ballots, the person voted for as vice president. So this thing that happened before will not happen again. They're designating who they want for president, who they want for vice president. And they shall make a distinct list of all the persons voted for president. Now, the rest of this paragraph talks about how many votes you need to be elected president. And since popular votes do not count, except to determine which people get elected as electors, it's the electoral votes that elect the president. And so the question is, how many do you need? And what happens if you have 2 or 3 or 4 people, maybe 4 people, all having electoral votes? What happens? So you have 435 members of Congress in the House of Representatives. You have 100 in the Senate. You have 535. Plus 3 equals 538 to
be elected president, you need 270 electoral votes. 270 electoral votes. Now, where does this plus 3 come from? Anybody have any idea? This is the 535 electoral votes from the states representing the total number of senators and representatives. Well, what about this plus 3? Where's that come from? Anybody have any ideas?
District of Columbia?
District of Columbia. Because as we'll see, there's been an amendment to the Constitution, which although the people in District of Columbia do not have a senators and representatives, they have been given the right to vote in presidential elections. So you get 3 from there. So you get 538 electoral votes, you need 270 to win. Now, if you just have 2 people running, this is not a problem. Because somebody's going to get the majority. The problem occurs when you have 3 people running. And maybe 4 people running. The last time a third-party candidate, not a Democrat or a Republican, managed to get some electoral votes, in other words, carried some states, was George Wallace in 1968. So 30 years ago, last time it happened. Ross Perot ran a very good race in 1992, got 19% of the vote, but he carried no states. So it didn't make any difference. He could have gotten 30% of the vote. Makes no difference. What counts is what states you carry and how many electoral votes you had. He had no electoral votes. Wallace had some in 1968. So if you have 3 people or 4 people having electoral votes, then you may have a problem. Nobody gets this 270. So when the people go to vote in December and they vote, nobody gets this 270. What happens? And this is what the rest of this part of the amendment says. What happens? Then Congress gets involved. Now notice here. If no person has such a majority, then from the person having the highest numbers not exceeding 3 on the list, those voted for president, the House of Representatives shall choose. So the House of Representatives then takes the top 3 people. They take the top 3 people who've gotten electoral votes, and then they vote. Now, there are 435 members in the House of Representatives. Under the Constitution here, this 12th Amendment, how many votes does the person need in the House of Representatives to be elected president if he gets into the House of Representatives? Oh, let's see here. Katie Cheney, here? Okay. How many votes?
I have no idea.
Okay. So we have one suggestion, no idea. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else have any ideas?
Oh, maybe 2/3, 4/35.
2/3 of 435. Okay. This will be second 2/3 of 435. Okay. Anybody else have a suggestion? Okay. 2/3 of present. Anybody else? Greatest number of what? Okay. Greatest number, whoever gets the most votes. Greatest number. Anybody else? Okay, answer 26. Okay, answer 26. How does this occur? Take a look at this. Now notice, the person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be president, okay. And if no person has such a majority, then for the person to have the highest numbers not exceeding 3. Okay, so it goes in. The House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot for president. Now notice, but in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states. The representation from each state having 1 vote. So in other words, the state of California, which has over 50 representatives, gets 1 vote. The state of Alaska, which has 1 representative, gets 1 vote. So the representatives in California are going to have a vote among themselves to see how their vote goes. The person in Alaska is just going to have to, sleep on it, decides how they want to vote. But in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states, the representation of each state in one vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states. And this is maybe where some people got the 2/3. In other words, before you can have a vote in the House of Representatives, there has to be somebody there from 2/3 of the states before there can be a vote. Somebody there from 2/3 of the states. Otherwise, I can't have a vote. And a majority of all the states, doesn't say of all the states, shall be necessary to a choice. There are 50 states, the majority is 26. So you need 26 votes.
What if you can't get to it?
Keeps going. It keeps going. There is no president. Keeps going. In fact, it talks about down here, and if the House of Representatives shall not choose a president whenever the right of choice shall develop upon them before they say the fourth day of more existence change, the vice president shall act as president. So you just keep going. You need 26. Now you can imagine if it ever gets into a situation like this, the kinds of deals that will be offered to people. You vote